Okay, there is a lot going on in the country with people trying to decide, are we living in a banana republic where people try to control the opposite party? Are we living in times where we're watching the United States and our values unravel? Is the two-party system working, or do we need to add more parties? To discuss some of these big topics, I have with me today Will Pierce. Will, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
So, just a little bit of background. Will has recently left the Democrat Party, and I'm going to ask questions and open that up. But his background is former military. He helped with the Biden presidential run. He's helped with the Bernie Sanders presidential run, and has been a Democrat for many, many years. And now, as he's opened his eyes, he's seeing things a little bit differently. Will, how long ago did you decide that the Democrat Party was not the party that you grew up, believing in or voting for? And what was the major? Was there a major thing that made you say, "Okay, I'm done. I'm walking away at this point"?
I don't think there was one major thing. I think it was just building up over time, over the past year to 2 years, I would say. The Democratic Party in recent years has changed a lot. Instead of it being a party focused on a little man building up that and just everyday economics, it's now became the party of Big Brother. You have to agree with the Democratic Party 100% on every issue, and if you don't, then you're not in lockstep with them. It kind of reminds me of what's going on in a lot of other countries overseas, such as in countries that understand North Korea, South Korea, North Korea and China as well. But the thing that is overall is that's not how you build, like a coalition. Politics is a game of addition. It's a mathematical game. You have to get to 50% plus one. If you're going to alienate your base, if you're going to alienate people, then that's not constructive for anything. Right now, just everything that's going on with our country, we're very divisive. It's more us against them. That's not what I feel our country is. We have to get back to being able to unite and be able to build each other up.
Yeah. One thing that President Biden said that I was like, okay, if he could accomplish this, I think it might actually make the country better. He said, unlike the Republicans, Democrats, we're going to build from the bottom up and the middle out. And we're going to make a more prosperous America for everybody, especially the little guy. And I thought, oh, that would be great because, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And what we've seen with this high inflation and all of this spending is we've actually seen the bottom not go up but go further down, and the middle hasn't gone out; it's just gone down. And so the rich have continued to get rich, the poor have continued to get poor, but we're decimating the middle class. Have you witnessed something similar as you've lived through these high inflation times over the last couple years?
Absolutely. Just like, recently with the holidays, I've seen it firsthand myself. One thing that I'm very upset with the administration overall is they keep saying, oh, let's raise minimum wage, let's do this, let's, do that. But instead, they're not understanding that if you raise minimum wage, that's all good. People have more money in their paycheck, but that money is going to go out right away because now everything's going to cost more. Or on top of it, then you sit there and you see what's going on at the border right now. You have countless illegals crossing over the border, taking tax dollars and taking resources away from communities that need it. And instead of being able to address those problems, it's just let's just throw more money at that issue instead of looking at it and solving at the root at what it is.
Yeah. Do you see do you see key issues where you feel like Democrats are now out of touch with their voter base? For example, if I were to ask a Republican, what are things that are important to you? They would say paying lower taxes. They would say maybe reining in abortion, the southern border. If you were to ask Democrats, they might say looking after minority communities, making sure that there's access to abortion, making sure that everybody's equal, and like so. But when you look back on it, what are some of the key areas that you would say, man, from what it was Obama and before that, XYZ has changed?
Perfect example is I would actually say like you hit the nail on the head with taking care of the minority communities or just taking care of large, like lower income. Perfect example is Chicago. This is a city that has been under Democratic control for not even like decades, for centuries, and we just see it getting worse and worse and worse. What we're seeing is like in these major Democratic cities, you see the Democrats proclaiming, like this is what how we have to do as a country. This is what it should look like. But what you're seeing, like look at San Francisco, look at LA, look at New York, look at Chicago. You see the like you just said, the poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer. Like you just see communities being left behind overall. You're not seeing anyone in the Democratic Party step up and say, hey, let's stop what we're doing. Let's try to fix it. Instead, if you try to disagree with them, they say, nope, you're this, you're that, like, and they try to put you back in a box. One major issue as well for me is that personally for me, I'm a new farter. And just looking right now at the local education system. In a lot of democratic communities, what you have going on is like, you have this whole entire belief of like pushing gender ideology, pushing this, pushing that, but they're forgetting that like, like at the end of the day, we have to make sure that our next generation knows the basics. I hate to sound old fashioned, but reading, writing, arithmetic plus STEM, that's, if you look at how the United States performs comparable to other countries, it's just terrible. And it can kind of just go back to the whole entire focus of changing from STEM teaching to gender ideologically and all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. You had mentioned to me off camera that your wife is originally from Illinois. I've been watching as the new mayor of Chicago is blaming Republicans and white people for the problems there, and saying that Governor Abbott of Texas, where you are, is racist. He's dividing the country by sending all these illegal immigrants up there. But then he holds like town hall meetings and announces to the city, we're going to take money from education and from seniors, and we're going to build more houses for illegal immigrants. And
Yep.
but yet they have struggling communities that are multi-generational within Chicago that would benefit from a hand up. And yet it seems like Americans who pay taxes and live in this country have kind of been shoved to the side to make room for illegal aliens. Is this, it's like they always play to the lowest, weakest denominator, right? Where it's like, okay, wait a minute, they don't speak English. They're coming here with no money. They have no connections. Therefore, we must pour all of this money in and forget all of the people that give us that money. Those voters that give us that money. What is your take on the situation in Chicago with this new mayor?
Pretty much it just goes back to the part that the Democratic Party, it's a party of do as I say, not as I do. They just want the only thing that the Democratic Party wants, they want your vote and they want your money. That's the two things overall. Instead of sitting there looking at the main issue and being like, hey, how can we help this community? How can we help that community? They claim, oh, they're the party of lifting people, lifting, the generation, lifting a community up. But instead, what they're just doing is it just goes back years and years and years, especially in the African American community in Chicago. You just have the belief that like, oh, the Democratic Party, they're going to help our community. And then, if we elect them this time, they're going to help. Then 2 more years, oh, if we elect them, it's going to help. And it's just over and over and over. And instead, especially myself, I've noticed this in recent years myself, even like, when I was thinking about leaving a party or just disagreeing with the party, it's kind of like the taboo or like the dirt rail. It's like, oh no, you can't disagree with the party. Oh no, like, they've done so much for the African American community. But then you sit there and you're like, wait a minute, like we should not, the African American community in particular, should not just have their vote being taken advantage of, just being counted on by the Democratic Party. Every election, every party should have to fight for every single vote. It should not just be you're black, you have to vote Democrat. It's just unacceptable to me as well.
Yeah, wasn't it Biden who said on Charlemagne the God's podcast something like, "If you don't vote Democrat, then you ain't black."
Yeah,
Where,
it's yeah.
where he literally was like, "Listen, if you have more melanin in your skin tone, then you must vote for me and my party, or else you won't get any help." I would find that offensive, and yet most people, it seemed like, were like, "Yeah, I'll give him a pass. He's older, maybe he doesn't know what he's saying." But for me, I saw that from the outside, going, "Oh, wait a minute, that seems like you're not even going to work to try to earn my vote by doing something for me or my community or my family." What were your thoughts on his comments?
just taking it a step further, that's why so many Black communities are being left behind, I feel, because the Democratic Party takes the African American community for advantage. They're like, oh, they're going to vote for us. So then they get the vote. So now if you're a community and you're always expected to vote a certain way. Now, like when you have major issues in your community, that's not going to be addressed because like the leaders who control everything, the purse strings, who control the social services and everything, they're like, oh no, we have that community. We're not going to like do anything. Like just imagine, put your hat on real quick. You're the mayor of Chicago. You have a community, you have a, let's just say on the north side, you have the white community that's like, like they can go Democrat, they can go Republican. Or you have an African American community that most of the time is going to vote for you. Where are you going to send more resources? Where are you going to dedicate more of your time? Where are you going to go after? Because you have to be up for election in 2 years. It's simple science. It's simple numbers at the end of the day. And that's why so many communities are being left behind because the Democratic Party are just taking them for granted. And instead of sitting there and, like standing up and being like, no, my vote is not just, you're not just going to get it because of who I am, my race, my creed, my background and everything. I feel a lot of Americans have to sit up and on both sides of the party, they have to say, no, we have to come together as a nation. We have to fix these issues and we can't just push it down for another 2 years or blame the last administration.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I like even now I'm like, okay, what is Ron DeSantis going to do for me? What is Nikki Haley going to do for me? What would Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do for me? What might Trump do for me? Like you think about these things, but I guess if you feel like it's okay, like here's a great example. Donald Trump, he's not going to go campaign in New York when New York votes 70% Democrat. He's not going to go campaign and spend $100 million trying to win California if California has gone blue. Same thing. If you know a community is locked in, then you don't have to
Not
do
going there.
anything for
Yeah.
them, except for tell them not what we're going to do for you, but what the other group will take away from you. I see that game a lot as well. There's a famous saying, "You shall know people by their fruits," right? Their works. Just using that context, would you say that the country has been more united or more divided under Joe Biden?
I'd say more divided. And like this is not even under like President Biden. I'm saying just overall, what we've seen in recent months and recent years, you just see, like politics have turned into that taboo conversation. It always was taboo, but it's kind of like now it's to the point where it's like, like you can't even talk about it like at all. You have people kind of like a perfect example was I was talking with my uncle yesterday, and he lives in Maryland, which is a mainly blue state, and he put out a Trump sign. And that was just like people actually came to his house and said, "Oh no, that's triggering to me." It's like it's triggering that someone is, like supporting their political candidate. My personal belief, I have this. It's a saying that it goes back for a while, but it's pretty much that like I may not agree with what you say, but I will fight for your right to say it. And that is like kind of like I feel is just like should be the creed of America. Like like we can disagree, on like on issues here and there, but at the end of the day, we're like, you know what? He has his right. He can, if he wants to put out a Trump flag, that's great. If he wants to support Joe Biden, if this person wants to do this, if that person wants to do that, that's great. And that's where we have to live as a nation. But instead, it's that we cannot do that without you being a racist, you're a sexist, you're this, you're that. It's just gotten too divided. And like, I don't see our country coming back from this at all, I feel.
Yeah, I would hope that somebody would rise up that could unite, but based on who the two front runners are for each party, they're both divisive people. I'm not going to pretend like Trump isn't really great at dividing a room. I mean, he's an explosive person, but Joe Biden has kind of snuck in as this like grandpa who could have united things. He said he would do it, and then he's done the opposite. He gives these speeches with these big red lights behind him, pounding the podium. MAGA people will ruin the world and ruin the country. So kind of the opposite of what we thought we were getting. Now, when it comes to Biden, I'm sure you've noticed that since he started running to today, he's become more feeble. He's really struggling with his mental acuity. Do you think that Democrats will allow him to run in 2024, or as we get closer to the Democrat convention, are they going to find a way to push him out?
I feel they'll let him run just because overall right now, the issue is you have no one as a leader next. It's like, okay, if they push him out, then what? I'm sorry, I'm just going to say Kamala Harris, she doesn't have the support. If you look at the polling, if you look at the numbers, it's not there. So then you have to now look at like, like the Democratic bench and be like, okay, who's next? And the thing is, it's kind of too late right now in the cycle to like have someone come out. You have the potential of Gavin Newsom coming out, but if you look at his numbers throughout the country, that's not going anywhere. You just have it like it's if they wanted to not push him out, but like have someone ready as a second candidate, they need to get this ready over like the past few months, if not a year. And it's just too little, too late, I feel.
Yeah, and Gavin Newsom, unless maybe blackmailed, he probably wouldn't even want to jump in last minute, because if your first national spotlight is you losing, that's a
Yeah.
terrible way to start your political. Where if he could clean up California, and then wait out an election cycle and then come in as a candidate with several years of building up who he is, his track record, but he's going to have to clean up a lot. Even California recalled him because of the way he behaved during COVID. Um,
You did have for a little bit, Dean Phillips, who, he's running right now, but
yes,
barely, I would say, he's like, like you had Dean Phillips who was coming up, but then like I feel they dropped the bag a lot. Like, they had the chance, when you announce as a candidate, that's the most excitement you get. You have to build on that momentum. But I feel the little bit of momentum that he had, it just stopped. And like, he had a potential to do a lot there, but it was like, no, there was nothing like, there was no fuel in a fire, essentially.
yeah. No, and I've listened to him, and other than bagging on Trump as his main horse in the race, he does have good ideas. He does have a good track record. He's intelligent. I don't see anything super negative about the guy. I don't know if you were aware of this, because I just barely read this myself, but while everyone was distracted with Biden's Department of Justice trying to get Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado, the Biden for reelection campaign was actually able to remove Marianne Williamson from Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and one other state. But when you add it up, they basically disenfranchised almost 40 million Americans' right to vote for a Democrat other than Joe Biden. How is that not election interference? It completely removed the people's freedom to vote for who they want.
Taking a step further, if you see what happened to Trump in Colorado, like personally, I'm undecided right now. I'm staying out of the race, but just removing someone from the ballot who's, like hasn't been tried or convicted, it's just getting personal. And it really sets a bad precedent for our nation. I was saying this when, like during both of the President Trump's impeachment, I'm like, it sets a bad precedent. Now every other party, when someone else gets elected, they're gonna be like, oh, let's impeach him. And we see that going on right now, with President Biden as well. So now you're moving a candidate from a ballot in another state, and now the other party is going to do that, and it's just going to set a bad precedent over and over and over again. We're just going to have this happen. Instead, like if we go back years, like again, you had disagreement amongst parties, disagreements even within the party, but people like, oh, let's not try to like disenfranchise voters. We'll beat them on the street. We'll beat them at like in a ballot box. It kind of at this rate, it feels like you're running scared. I personally feel if you're removing candidates from your own side of the party and also on the other side, it's like so you have no reason for me to vote for you. You have no reason for me to actually like why I should reelect you. You have to remove other people from the ballot. It's just plain dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that shocked me the most, Will, is how vocal members of the Biden presidential cabinet have been against Joe Biden, because they served together. Some people have said, "Oh, this is just an Obama third term." I don't know if I fully agree with that. I do see some carryover, but like Larry Summers and Axelrod, even Obama at times, they've been fairly critical of Biden, saying, golly, even you have gone too far. You've become too progressive. You ran as a moderate. You're not behaving at all like a moderate. Who is this guy? This is not the Joe Biden that we know. Have you seen any of that? And have you been shocked at how uh, any of the past people from the Obama administration have been kind of anti-Biden publicly.
Publicly, yeah, and privately too. I've seen it. Like that's one of the main reasons why I left because like again, I pretty much ran Joe Biden's exploratory effort in 2015, 2016. The Biden we see now is not the same Biden back then. We've seen a lot of changes. We've seen just internal politics, just like basic issues and basic beliefs that like Biden held near and dear. My big one with him is his word is his bond, and like Joe Biden has said that numerous times, and that's the Biden that I knew. That's not the Biden right now. He said certain things when he ran, like and got elected, and now that he's in office, it's kind of 180, and you just see a lot of people, you see a lot of donors, you see a lot of supporters leaving because it's like this is not the Joe Biden that I elected.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, interesting. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and helping us understand it. It's not every day that somebody so connected to Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and other big Democrats suddenly says, "Wait a minute." Just as an individual, as a father, as a husband, as someone who served my country, loves my country, I don't know if I can go along with this. I think one of the biggest things that you pointed out to me was this: everyone has to be in alignment with what the Democrats are saying, and if you're not, they kind of tear you apart. Democrat by even Democrats go after each other. But this idea of do what we say, not as we do, has really shaped the party into trying to create one particular type of Democrat that they can control.
Oh yeah, if you look back at it, even like underneath the Clinton administration, you had different sections in the Democratic Party. You had a lot of Democrats who could like agree to disagree. But then now if you look at it, perfect example, Joe Manchin. Here's a Democrat that didn't agree with the party 100% of the time. He's now decided that he's not going to run for re-election in the Senate. And then taking it a step further, he's actually exploring running for president. Instead of you just have like, like a party that can be like, oh, we may have our disagreements here and there and to work it out, it's just it's not possible. And then if the main thing for me is primaries are where that has to be addressed. In a primary, you figure out like your disagreements, then you unite at the convention. There's no primary right now. There's no discussion. It's just you have to be this way. You have to vote 100% Biden or else.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, they switched from New Hampshire down to South Carolina because Biden did so terrible back in 2015 up in New Hampshire. He and Kamala Harris, did not perform well. But then they, as they moved to South Carolina, they made promises with Clyburn, and all of a sudden, boom! Everybody jumped behind Joe Biden, and it was really kind of interesting to watch. Well,
One
Bill,
other thing, one other
okay.
thing with that's actually interesting. If you go back, even when I was running his exploratory effort, you have Joe Biden has a lot of support down in South Carolina. You have his largest donor base down there. He's done a lot of work down there. And then at the same time, you have the New Hampshire primary that's been set there for like decades. So like instead of sitting there and like, like just respecting the process, you have someone being like, nope, I pull a lot better down here. I have a lot more supporters. I have a lot more donors. This is where my base is. So you're just going to change, you're going to disenfranchise millions of voters up in New Hampshire who've been, this has been the set way just because your donors live in South Carolina. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, it's almost like that's a really good point. It's almost like the governor of New Hampshire, Sonunu, I think his name
Yep.
is. He's very anti Donald Trump, very pro Republican, but very anti Trump. So it would be like Trump being like, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe I'll switch everything to North Dakota with Christy Nome, where a lot of people like me, or maybe I'll switch to Florida." Where I won in a landslide and it's become a red state. But instead, hey, this is the process. This is what's been happening. So instead of running from your problem down to where you're accepted, it's almost like he purposely went back into his echo chamber so that they would echo back to him how wonderful he is, how amazing he is, all the support. But then, bypassing the entire process. I don't even think they put his name on the ballot in New Hampshire. That's
No,
how
yeah,
confident they are that he's going to win South Carolina.
they actually take him off the ballot. And like the other thing, going back to Dean Phillips, he had the chance there. Like imagine, like you're running against a sitting president and he's not even on the ballot. You have a chance. And then instead of sitting there and like dedicating resources there, they're like, oh no, we're just do our thing. But at the end of the day, you just have the party that's more focused on how things appear and how things look than rather what's going on underneath. And that's the main issue I have with them right now.
Yeah, and I'll get you out on this, but I saw that if they do remove Trump from the ballot in Colorado, Texas, Utah, Florida, a bunch of states,
Pennsylvania as well.
they're
Yep.
yeah, they're already prepared to remove Biden from the ballot. And it's like these attorney generals shouldn't be deciding the election. It should be us, the American people. But the country is shifting, and so it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next 11 months. Will, I want to thank you for coming on. If people want to follow you or stay connected, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter right now, Doug Will Pierce, and I'm also doing a regular column for the Daily Call as well, so they can look for it there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.